Okay, you don't forget. Oh wait, no. I do start this one.
Wait, yeah. You do it.
Okay. This is hashtag history episode 161. I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel. I was half expecting you to say, I'm Rachel. And I was literally going to respond with, and I'm Leah. It's just in my brain.
I should have. Honestly, I should have.
And I wouldn't have even hesitated.
Yeah.
And I'm Leah.
I just don't want to confuse people, you know? And this week I am kicking our season. What season are we on? 17?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, by taking over an episode.
Yay.
Yeah, and a little preface, you can probably hear Rachel as well as our listeners. I do have a bit of the sniffles, so my apologies for a scratchy throat. It really perfect timing for when I have to speak for 45 minutes. You know?
But by the end of the episode, there will be no voice.
It'll just be whispers.
You'll have to. This is a good preface that for the latter half of the episode, you will have to increase your volume to hear her speaking.
Truly,
so
you might. So it wouldn't be me, right? If I didn't get my initial inspiration for the topic of my takeover episode from some sort of movie or TV show or pop culture reference, right? I do that. I'm pretty sure almost every episode.
Yeah, I think so. We should look back and see if there's ever been an anomaly. But yeah, I feel like that tracks.
The only one I can think off the top of my head is the Kame line.
And what inspired you to do that one? Do you remember? Probably some rabbit hole you went down while researching a pop culture topic.
Yeah, totally. However, the reference inspo for this week's episode is not from a recent pop culture phenomenon, but instead from an admittedly old-ish source. Newsies.
The Newsies. We're millennials, so it is indeed old.
Yeah, that's right, folks. We are finally opening the gates and seizing the day and diving into the true story of the Newsboys Strike of 1899 that inspired the masterpiece of the 1992 Disney musical Newsies, starring Christian Bale, Bill Pullman, and Robert Duvall.
Wow.
For anyone who hasn't watched this movie, I urge, nay, I beg you to do so, if for no other reason than to see Robert Duvall play an unhinged version of Joseph Pulitzer. It's miraculous.
Is this where I'm going to make a confession.
Okay, you've never seen it.
I have seen parts of it. I know. This is actually a confession. This is like when you've been in a relationship with someone for a decade, which Leah and I have been in a relationship with each other for over a decade, and you're like finally coming clean about something that is how do I put this? Foundational to who you are as a person, Leah.
Right.
So I have never confessed this. I have seen like parts of the movie. I know some of the songs from just hearing them like on musical playlists or whatever. And I have seen the musical once, but it was like a local theater. I maybe even went with you to like the Woodland Opera House or something.
No, I think didn't we? I think we went to like the SAC musical.
Did
like
we?
Where the touring Broadway, whatever.
So I have seen it, but like references this Robert Duvall. I'm not catching or following what you're saying.
Okay, well that hurts.
Yeah, I know. This is why it's taking me 10 years to tell you.
Because it'll become painfully obvious to our listeners that just how obsessed I am, right? So
it's foundational to who you are.
Right. I will say I shockingly actually never saw or heard of Newsies as a child. But it came into my purview in high school when my friends Jill and Alina, shout out to them, introduced it to me, and we all became obsessed. And I mean like a level of obsessed where possibly our parents should have been more concerned than they were, because we would like watch this movie on repeat daily. And this is like junior and or senior year of high school. We were far too old for this.
That's what I was just going to say is like, no, all children do that. All children watch the same movie over and over. But wait. Near adults.
Yeah, no. Our friends, our counterparts in high school were partying and we were watching Newsies.
Maybe that's why your parents weren't concerned. They were like, this is a fantastic alternative.
This makes sense, yeah. So yeah, we were far too old for this. We did like to make fun of it a lot, but I'm not kidding when I say that we were like certifiable about it. We made posters, we learned dances, we picked out our boyfriends from the cast. This. It got so bad, or depending on how you look at it, good, that Jill's grandma, G, may she rest in peace, who had dementia and often couldn't remember her own daughter's name or where she was, would like finish the lyrics to a song while we were watching the movie because she heard it so often. So quoting Newsy songs is also one of the only ways I can get into my admittedly crappy New York City accent by singing, "That's my cigar, you'll steal another." Abamas, we got work to do.
I like the way that she spelled this to work. She literally spelled it W-Y-K. Work. You got work to do.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my little side tangent, and I guess a little warning for what may come. I may break out into song and dance sporadically throughout the episode, so you've all been warned.
I hope that you do, and it's time that come season 17 that we both came clean. You about your obsession, and me about my lack thereof, I guess.
It's, you know what? It's okay.
I've been so scared to tell you.
It's okay.
She's not sure. In her, she's like, I can see in your eyes you're debating, being like, I really am not feeling well. I think I should go lay down. Talk to you never again. But I'm going to learn not necessarily about the musical, but at least the inspiration behind it from you today, which I'm really excited about.
Maybe if and when we ever, can pull ourselves away from being moms, we can have a little Newsies movie date.
At midnight, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Midnight on a Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, before we dive into our cocktail segment, I suppose I can just give a quick synopsis of the 1899 Newsboys Strike for those of you listening.
And not the musical.
And not the musical, right. So in the summer of 1899, New York City newsboys, aka Newsies, organized a strike against two major newspaper publishers after a price increase for papers cut into their earnings. The strike disrupted newspaper distribution across the city and became a highly visible example of child labor organizing at the turn of the 20th century.
That's a phrase. Child labor organizing. That's a phrase.
It's sad that it was a thing.
Yep. Okay.
Reality sucked, you know? So hopefully that interests you if the song and dance doesn't sound up your alley. And now, the cocktail.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah.
And this is #History,
the podcast for both history nerds and history haters alike,
where we dive into history's greatest stories of controversy, conspiracy, and corruption.
So this week we are having a drink sponsored by Karen West, who wrote "Tequila cocktail, please." And then she also added a note that said, "Leah, if you mispronounce my name, I will cry." So I guess I'm taking this one for the team. And Karen, Kareen, I hope that I said your name right.
I'll just, you got one of them right.
Oh, you do know her.
Yes, yeah.
I didn't know you knew her.
Yeah, so I did not know that she was a listener. Shout out to Corinne. We went to high school together.
Corinne, okay. That's so cute then that she's like, I hope you pronounce my name right. Yeah. I didn't realize that you knew her. And I love now, this all makes more sense why she literally pointed you out.
She saw, targeted me.
Yeah. Right. Okay, well then Corinne, I did mess up your name. And that is not going to be the first time that I disappoint you because the cocktail for this week doesn't contain tequila. Sorry. I am sorry. We really appreciate your support. Please don't stop listening to the podcast. It was so sweet of you to sponsor this cocktail. Thank you so much for doing that. The truth is that there are 1,000,001 different cocktails inspired by the Newsies, and like pretty much none of them contain tequila.
Right.
But Corinne, out of the kindness of our hearts and only for that reason alone, Leah had an idea for how we can make it up to you. Please share.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to take a shot of tequila is what we're going to do.
We're crazy. It is 1:00 on a Saturday afternoon. And yes, that is precisely what we're going to do, Corinne, for you. In honor of you, we are going to do a shot of tequila before we even talk about what this week's cocktail is.
Yeah, and I will say I didn't even do a chaser. So, well, I
Me
guess
neither.
I have some water.
Water? Yeah, I have water too.
Lovely.
Okay, for Corinne.
I haven't taken a shot in a very long time.
Me neither. For Corinne, for season 17, for the Newsies.
Yeah,
Cheers.
for the Newsies. Oh,
that water was helpful.
That actually wasn't as bad as I expected. I was ready to start vomiting.
We might. That comes next.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Corinne, again. Seriously, that was so nice of you to sponsor one of the cocktails on our podcast. And thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
Okay. So like I mentioned, not many cocktails inspired by the Newsies had tequila in them, but there were literally millions upon millions of cocktails that happened inspired by the Newsies. And when I saw the title of this particular one, there was like no other option for me. And this again, Leah, I hope, though I have disappointed you this week by making my confession that I am not very adept at the Newsies. I am adept at you. And this is how well I know you, that even though I don't really know the musical, I knew the Seize the Day cocktail would be right up your alley.
You're right. Thank you. This might
See,
make up for it.
Okay. I chose this cocktail for you. I really did. I saw the name and I was like, we're doing that one. And then, when I saw what the ingredients were, that didn't hurt either.
No, it looks good.
It looks so good. So the Seize the Day cocktail, it is mango rum, coconut cream, pineapple juice, orange juice. You put all of that into a glass with ice and then mix it all together. And then you do like a little float or a dash of rum on top. They say to do dark rum, I'm sure for like the coloring to make it look prettier.
Yeah.
I just used more mango rum. And then you garnish with an orange slice or a pineapple wedge. Did you put the dark rum on top?
I did. All I have is dark rum because the mango rum I couldn't find. So I ended up doing a little bit of mango liqueur mixed with the dark rum.
That sounds really good.
Yeah. But mine looks, first of all, the shot, the floating whatever on top, completely all sunk in.
Yeah,
so,
mine always does.
And then also the coconut cream seems to have split.
Oh. So it looks like breast milk.
It looks. It doesn't look like vomit.
It doesn't look great, I will say.
I think it's gonna taste delicious.
Mine doesn't look like it's separated, but I can definitely tell there's a ton of the coconut cream at the bottom that I'm going to need to mix before I drink.
Yeah. Mine, it looks like split milk.
Yeah.
So looks gross. I'm sure it'll taste great.
I do have very, very good feelings about this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh my God.
Oh, I just got a chunk of coconut cream. Oh, I probably should have mixed it better.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I wish I had done is a little better mixing.
Well, so the instructions that you posted for us says just to stir gently, and so otherwise I would have put it all in a shaker. And
exactly. That's what I was expecting.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation if anyone does want to do this. Shake it.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I was expecting them to say throw it in a shaker. They did not.
Yeah.
This is a 10 for me. This is phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
I really love coconut. I really love
too.
pineapple.
I'm gonna say a 9. A 9. It's probably the -1 point is because of the separation. It's
consistency, texture. Yeah. If you close your eyes, pretend it looks totally different. Did that bring the rating up?
No, because then a chunk of it just hit my lips.
So. Reminded you?
Yeah. No, but it tastes great.
Well, this is honestly the perfect episode for you to be taking things over, because now I just get to sit back with what is
your 10,
one of my favorite drinks in a long time. Yeah, a 10. And I get to sit back and listen and sip on this delicious coconut cocktail.
All right. I am excited for you for that. Less excited for the talking for me. Talking and possibly singing that you guys will all have to endure.
I can't wait.
Okay. At the turn of the 19th century, newspapers were king.
Mm-hmm.
They were the primary source of information and news to the general public, making publishers and owners not only powerful, but rich.
Yeah.
They often would pump out multiple issues per day, a morning and an afternoon issue. And while morning editions of the papers in the late 1800s were often delivered directly to subscribers, the afternoon editions relied on a more direct form of distribution. Newsboys. Newsboys, or newsies, as you'll probably hear me use interchangeably, almost exclusively came from poor, mostly immigrant families. Many were homeless or runaways, and many distributed the afternoon papers after their school days, if they attended school at all.
Oh, wow.
Now, in 1899, newsies would purchase papers directly from the publishers at 50 cents per hundred and sold them at about 1 cent each, usually, for a profit of half a cent per paper.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like across the board. There was an association of newspaper publishers that they kind of like set prices and whatnot to be the same across the board across the nation.
Mm-hmm.
These newsies were not employees of the newspaper, but instead more like contractors.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I assumed that they were employed by the newspapers.
Yeah, they had no representation, no contracts, no union, and frankly, no oversight.
Yeah.
Side tangent, one of my favorite numbers from the movie musical is the opening one called Carrying the Banner, which basically details the life of these newsboys. They were walking the streets for hours, hawking newspapers, in the hot, in the cold. You know, they the more papers they sold, the more money they made, and the quicker they could get out of the sweltering heat or the freezing cold. Headlines were often adjusted to make them sound more interesting to prospective buyers. And the kids often played up the whole "I'm poor and hungry" routine to get folks to purchase papers from them out of pity. An example of this from the musical is when they sing no, I won't sing, but they sing like, "Look, they're putting up the headline, what's it say? That won't pay. I get better stories from the copper on the beat. I was gonna start with 20, but a dozen will be plenty. Tell me how I'm gonna make ends meet. We need a good assassination. We need an earthquake or a war. About a crooked politician. It's stupid that ain't news no more."
I love it.
Yeah. Anyways,
I especially love hearing children singing, begging for assassinations and earthquakes. This is really heartwarming.
Right. Yeah. And something I read said that most of these newsies were between the ages of like 12 and 17. So they are children.
Yeah.
Doing this.
Making money for their families.
Yeah.
Like their parents depend on them doing this work.
Yep. In 1898, the economical impact of the Spanish-American War took a toll on newspaper publishing costs, or so the publishers said. A lot of the times they were actually they wanted to sell more papers, so they were like publishing extra editions to cover war because, you know, people eat up that sort of information. So it wasn't really actually like the cost of the war that was making the newspaper prices go up, but more just the fact that the newspapers were taking advantage of people's wanting to read more and more about the war.
Definitely.
So instead of cutting administrator salaries or finding ways to cut costs internally, almost all newspapers decided to offset their costs by charging the newsies 60 cents per hundred instead of 50 cents. Because who gives a crap about a bunch of poor working children when it comes to the bottom line, right?
No, exactly, though. Honestly, I guess I'm just so cynical right now, but that is where my mind would immediately go to. Like, if I'm going to rip someone off, it's going to be these children that I don't care about.
Have no representation and can't, they're like, what can they do?
What can they do? Because they do depend on this. So they're going to keep paying the wages.
Yeah.
Or not the wages. They're going to keep paying for these newspapers no matter what I charge them.
Yeah. Now, initially, newsies were actually surprisingly okay with this. They didn't complain about this price increase because the increased wartime reporting also coincided with public interest in the war-fueled purchases. So they didn't actually lose profit. They were selling more papers.
Yeah.
But after the war concluded in 1898, most publishers ended up reverting back to their old pricing. But the Evening World, which was owned by the Joseph Pulitzer, and the New York Evening Journal, owned by William Randolph Hearst, may have heard of him.
We've talked about him.
Kept their prices at 60 cents a pop. With wartime news in the past, the public were less interested in the newspaper headlines being hawked, and sales did end up dropping for the newsies. As you can imagine, Newsies ended up eating that cost, and they were not happy. For kids scraping by on pennies a day, that extra 10 cents, which is equivalent to roughly $4 today, was a huge hit to their already small profits.
Yeah.
So on July 19th of 1899, a group of newsies in downtown Manhattan assembled near Newspaper Row, which is like where most of the newspaper publishers were housed at the time, and they organized a union.
I love this newspaper row. That's just like a thing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then what did you say? Children were organizing a union? Come again? What was that?
Yeah. And, you know, I'll kind of touch on this, I think, a couple times throughout the episode, but like this was during a time where there was like unionization and like that sort of thing was really like running rampant, if you will. It was like growing in popularity at the time, obviously for mostly adult industries.
Right.
But like these kids were one of the first, you know, I mean, like we talked about, most of them are children. There were some adults here and there that did this, but like they were taking note, right? They saw what was happening and they were replicating it.
This is definitely that big workers' union rights timing. I mean, this is not too far out. This is like a decade out from the shirtwaist factory fire in New York.
Season 1. If you
want to like episode like 3 or something like that. Crazy.
Please don't listen.
Please don't listen to that.
So yes, back to the Newsies.
Yes.
They sent word of this new union to their counterparts in other boroughs of New York City that unless the Journal and the World returned prices to their pre-war levels, they would strike. The following day, they kept their promise and they flipped their shit when prices did not revert back. And I mean like literally, because they flipped over newspaper distribution wagons and they sang, they said, we'll...
From the historical records, these are the words that they verbally said.
Yeah, they, we'll do what we got to do until we break the will of Mighty Bill and Joe, and the world will know. And yeah, that's a quote from the musical, not reality. So... I'm blurring the lines here a little bit, but you get the picture. More than 400 newsies had gathered at the first display of unity for the newly formed union.
Wow.
That action had an unexpected ripple effect throughout the city and beyond. Within days, thousands of boys in all 5 boroughs and in cities and towns throughout the Northeast joined this strike, refusing to sell the Evening Journal and the New York World. The two, may I remind you, largest circulation newspapers in the nation.
And they can't, when I say they can't afford, I'm putting that in quotations, that these newspapers can't afford to lose these newsies. They technically could afford to lose them. I'm sure they could afford, with how much money they were raking in, to employ people to send out their afternoon newspapers, but they don't want to.
Right.
That's going to hurt their bottom line.
Exactly. It'll hurt their bottom line. And like some of the tactics that the newsies took, that this union took, actually made even that impossible, which I'll touch on. So the newsies, they held rallies, they distributed handbills, and they even openly harassed and in some cases attacked anyone who crossed the picket to sell papers.
Ooh.
That was kind of commonplace at the time for unions, apparently in New York City. Any man or boy caught crossing the line were often mobbed by a group of the strikers and their papers were destroyed. After 2 journal delivery men were hospitalized after encounters with angry newsboys, Joseph Pulitzer's managing editor, Don Seitz, wrote in a memo to his boss, quote, "The Newsboys Strike has grown into an extensive and menacing affair. It is proving a serious problem. Practically all the boys in New York and many of the adjacent towns have quit selling," end quote. So in an effort to combat that, the violent attacks, the scab newsboys faced the newspapers. As you mentioned, they one of the tactics they took was to pay grown men, who often were like desperate unhoused men in New York City. So they would pay these men to sell their papers. They would even go so far as to offer them police protection. But most men offered this option, refused it, saying they were standing behind the newsies.
Wow.
Yeah. The few that did decide to sell were quickly caught and attacked by the Newsies, though. So to my point earlier, like being, the newspapers, they were attempting to, like, as you mentioned, they were willing to pay a little bit more maybe to get other people to do this because they could afford to do that. And it wasn't working.
Yeah, it wasn't possible.
Yeah. Just a side note, the few women and girl Newsies that did exist and remained during the strike, they fared a bit better because, as the Newsies union leader Kid Blink, aka Louis Belletti, said, quote, "A fella can't soak a lady," end quote. And that is an actual direct quote from an interview he did with a reporter, not from the musical. So
does the musical have girl Newsies?
No, not a single one.
Like I said, my exposure to the movie is not great. And in my limited exposure and my memory only says that there were a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, and to be fair, it was probably like 99% dudes. I think they said that there was one particular, she was actually not a girl. She was a woman, newsie, and she was almost like they saw her as like their patron saint because she, it was so few and far between that like women or girls were doing this that they actually like revered her for being part of their group. So despite the initial more gruesome tactics, the Newsies eventually did organize to do much more than just beat up on scabs. They commandeered city squares, they hung banners in the streets, and they forced newspapers to, quote, "feel the pain in their bottom line," end quote. Circulation plummeted, with one paper dropping from 360,000 a day to just 125,000 a day.
This is so inspiring to me, actually, because of the moment that we're in right now, politically and socially, right? And we have seen this in our current political moment is people boycotting businesses and organizations that are funding the corrupt administration. I just love to see these historical examples of people resisting it's been going on forever and ever and ever. And like, look how powerful and impactful it is. I know the limited bit that I do know about the story is that things are going to turn in favor of the people by the end of this story instead of the corporations. And so I'm just really inspired by that.
Yeah, I think it goes to show, and I do talk about this a little bit further down, but like it's the David and Goliath story, like you said, right? Like it is never no hope for the little guy.
I love that. I saw something just yesterday that was it was a historian that she's just doing like a history of resistance basically, and she was saying there is no way of knowing how impactful each and every small act of resistance is, right?
Yeah.
But she said without those acts of resistance, the other thing that we can't know is how long this regime or whatever would have lasted in history without them. And so when you look at things like this, like how long would, probably forever and ever, would these newspaper corporations monopolize this industry had there not been these acts of resistance?
Yeah, sorry to keep using analogies and stuff, but it's like, what is the whole saying about like a grain of sand? Like a single grain of sand, it doesn't make any difference. But when you kind of collectively come together, it can be like a huge impact. Anyways,
off our soapbox.
Yeah. So why was this strike making such a big wave, right? Speaking of sand and beaches.
Yeah.
It was good segue, right?
Yeah. Speaking of nautical things.
It was organized mostly by children, right? With the leadership and support of a very few young adults who sold papers alongside the kids. The union was truthfully scattered, with most newsies from the various boroughs like being more loyal to the leaders from their particular neighborhood rather than the leadership of the combined union that represented them as a whole. And yet they were really making the publishers sweat.
Love it.
A couple things did seem to contribute to this. Firstly, this strike and the organization of the Newsies was not an aberration. It capped a decade of discontent in the newspaper trade. Several previous strikes actually had occurred in the years leading up to 1899, but none as big or as impactful as this one.
There's your grain of sand again.
Yeah.
This was
the capstone.
There you go. Yeah.
The strike also coincided with, as we talked about, a national strike wave that had a lot of the public behind the cause. It also coincided with a local heat wave, which was keeping people off the streets of New York City who might normally still purchase the newspapers being hawked by the scabs. And a militant protest was also happening at the same time by a streetcar motormen union in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And this kept New York City police officers tied up and less focused on reacting to what the newsies were doing.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Another aspect of the Newsboys Strike and union that really drew the attention of the nation to them was their general ragtag aesthetic and presentation. Mm-hmm. The strikers presented the full range of ages, ethnicities, and disabilities found in the news trade. Kid Blink, who I mentioned earlier, who was a red-haired spokesman for the strikers in New York, was a charismatic 18-year-old Italian-American with a bum eye, like he actually wore an eye patch. David Simmons, another representative of the union, also 18, was a Jewish boxing champion in the 105-pound class. Then Brooklyn's Newsies leaders included the Irish duo of Racetrack Higgins and Adult, and then also Spot Conlon, age 14. All of these were characters in the movie, by the way, and all of them were actually like inspired by, these were their actual like nicknames that they went by.
That's really cool.
And all of these newsies were quoted in news articles about the strike using their distinct accents, capturing really like the hearts and attention of the public. To some extent, people were kind of making fun of, not making fun of them, but like, oh, how cute, like how cute and silly they are. Now, for obvious reasons, the affected New York newspapers obviously didn't publish a word about the strike. But many other papers ran articles and illustrations detailing the skirmishes, the mass meetings, and the negotiations. They often quoted the newsboys in their signature slang, as I mentioned. One example is a quote saying, "Weasons has got to stand by one another these times." And they like spelled it out. Like,
yeah, I'm so glad that you audibly said it, because reading that, I have no idea what that is saying.
Yeah, so that was a quote by one of the strikers named Billy, and this was reported by the Jersey City Evening Journal. And then he went on to say, "'Cause if we don't, sure as hell will get in the neck from dem capitalists."
I see your point about like kind of making fun of these kids.
Yeah.
But from a historical perspective, it does really capture the moment, and it captures their distinctions and their demographics and who was really at the front of this movement.
Well, and it's really interesting too that the newspapers chose to quote them in this way, like actually spelling out exactly what they said instead of kind of like summarizing it.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting like little snippet of journalism history.
Yeah. And speaking of journalism history, it's also obvious that, like Pulitzer's and Hearst's newspapers were not covering these strikes.
Yeah.
But that did, when you said that earlier, that does make me think about just like the integrity of journalism. Like, this is such a huge thing that's going on in New York. Mm-hmm. I mean, they cut newspaper distribution in half, and yet they're just not talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
And apparently, this isn't in my like outline or anything, but apparently like Hearst was very much just like silent. He knew how much support there was for like this new union movement. So he was just staying silent on it. Pulitzer, while he didn't publish anything about it, like he was apparently going like out of his way to try to, cut this out, like really going to his colleagues and really making a ruckus about it.
Wow.
So there were two very different reactions to the situation. Now, just speaking about like all these articles and whatnot, Rachel, I would love for you to just describe maybe some of the headlines and photos from a few of the articles I've collected on this.
Okay. Oh, okay. So the first one, this is cool. This is an illustration. The caption is "The hottest strike of midsummer." It looks like chaos, and it's a bunch of young boys that are shredding newspapers. I don't know if you know, but it kind of looks like there's a man at the center of the picture. Maybe he's supposed to be at least representing one of these heads of these newspaper corporations.
Yeah.
Because he's being covered in these newspapers that they're just kind of trashing on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what newspaper that one came from, but yeah, you described it perfectly. It's a drawing of the Newsboys.
Okay. And now that I'm looking at the second one, I am genuinely shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Like my stomach has fallen to the bottom of my body, because when you were saying children, you did mean children. Like there's an image here in a newspaper of these newsies. They are genuine children. Can we, before, I'm sure you want me to talk about the headline, but I cannot look away from this picture, because in the far right of the picture is a child maybe taking a shot.
Yeah, he's drinking a beer, I think.
Is this what I am looking at right now? Is a child throwing back some tequila far better than I just did?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's what I think. It's like, again, I don't want to like make fun of these kids, but there's something really endearing about like children, like they're smoking cigars on the street, and like
that's what we say all the time about like one of the cutest things about having toddlers. They are just miniature adults. Like
they just think they're adults.
Yeah, they think that they're adults. They dress like adults. They try to act like adults, and it's adorable.
Yeah,
this is alarming. Semi-endearing, semi-shocking. The headline next to this picture is Newsies boycott New York papers. Refuse to sell evening journals and Evening World at present prices. And then there's a whole article about it.
Yeah.
This picture has to go up on our Instagram, because it is genuinely shocking just when you realize these are the ages of these children.
Yeah.
That were doing this work.
Yeah, this is like one in a million. There's so many articles and so many pictures like this.
Wow.
Where it just shows like they are children.
Yes.
And granted, like I mentioned, a lot of the leaders were more like 17, 18 year olds, even some like into their 20s and whatnot. But it's young, right? And they are representing the majority of the newsies were 11-year-olds, if not younger.
Wild.
So
I'm sorry, I can't get over it. Like looking at that picture, it's like, and that is why prohibition happened not long afterward.
Yeah.
Because babies were drinking tequila.
Like truly. Like could you imagine? That's your girls in a couple years.
I know. What did I just see?
Oh my gosh, hilarious. So
not the point at all, but oh my god.
No, but I love that you mentioned it, because like that is part of like this whole like I think people saw these pictures and like it's kind of funny, like there's something endearing about it that just really drew the attention of the nation.
For sure.
So on July 24th, the Newsboys held a mass meeting at the New Irving Hall on Broome Street in New York. A crowd of 2,000 gathered inside, while another estimated 3,000 boys remained outside. Kid Blink urged them to, quote, stick together like plasta. Ain't that 10 cents worth as much to us as it is to Hearst and Pulitzer? Who are millionaires? Well, I guess it is. If they can't spare it, how can we?
That was amazing.
I'm so sorry, end quote.
I'm so sorry, end quote. The I'm so sorry was not part of the quote.
No, it was not. Sorry for the confusion. Following the meeting, the Newsboys decided to utilize less violent tactics on scabs, since by this point the public did seem to be collectively in support of the strike and joined in by not purchasing any papers sold by the scabs.
Wow.
The July 24th meeting was to be followed by a parade on July 26th with an estimated 6,000 boys planning to march through New York, but plans for that parade unfortunately fell through due to issues obtaining permits. Nice to know that even back then, bureaucracy was atrocious.
Yeah. Jumping back, actually, I just am really impressed by the public support of this movement, because I know I keep bringing things back to the current political situation we're in, but right? Yeah, that's what we do. And that's what history is, right? It's a reflection of the past on the future. But this is just the first example that came to mind is, one of these businesses that people have been boycotting this year is Spotify, because they had a contract throughout 2025 with ICE that they would play ads. Oh, it's bad. In 2025, Spotify was running ads for ICE to like recruit ICE. I don't even want to use the word agents, ICE goons. ICE cosplayers. And anyway, where I'm going with this is like a lot of people did boycott Spotify, but then a lot of other people were like, I don't support this, but Spotify's my favorite music app.
Yep.
Right. I like it for all these features and stuff. Anyway, where I'm going with this is the kind of unanimous support around this Newsboy Strike is really fascinating, because you could still be a member of the public and say, I don't like that these corporations are doing this. I, in theory, support what the newsies are doing.
However,
I'd really like to get my paper.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think there were people still doing that, right? But
sure,
then,
of course there were. Yeah,
it was combined with adults. Any means for the newspapers to get those newspapers out to them outside of the newsies was also being hampered by this, whether it was by the support, by fear of people being fearful of actually going out and delivering it, or being beat up for purchasing a paper,
And that's a good point too, is getting your newspaper or not is so much of a bigger issue than switching your music streaming platform, right?
Yes, totally. Yeah, I do think that the stakes are a little different. Yeah, that's a good point. So despite news continuing to spread through mid to late July, Pulitzer and Hearst weren't budging, though they were definitely sweating a bit at this point, and not just due to the sweltering New York summer heat.
Or due to the tequila shot, which is why you are sweating.
Correct. And also maybe the slight fever I might be developing.
Maybe the fact that I'm coming down with a fever doesn't help.
They had experienced an estimated 20% drop in sales by this time.
Wow.
And a significant decrease on top of that in advertising revenue. So they were getting desperate, and circulation managers for their newspapers were asked to reach out to other child laborers like the Salvation Army Lasses to sell the papers, and other groups like that. But those groups all also refused to break the boycott. There really was.
This tells me there's such a united movement behind this, because I know that, when you were talking about unhoused men above, or like the Salvation Army, these people need money.
Yeah. They all are desperate, but they're still standing behind this group of, maybe it's something to do with the fact that they're like 11-year-old children who, they're like, how could you possibly take advantage of these kids like this? So the publishers then tried to buy off strike leaders. Some say for anywhere between $300 to $600, which is equivalent to $11,000 to $22,000 today a piece.
Wow.
So, a good chunk of change there.
For sure.
And unfortunately, in some cases, these bribes did appear to be successful.
I would expect that.
Yeah. When Kid Blink and Dave Simmons showed up on Park Row on July 26th, they were carrying bundles of The World and Journal, and they were donning new suits and flashing a roll of cash. So they were quickly asked to step down from their positions in the union.
Did that happen in the movie?
No, Kid Blink is a background character in the movie, and David, who I think it's supposed to be inspired by Dave Simmons in the movie, was like the main, or like the secondary protagonist. They would never. They would.
Yeah, I was
never.
They can't be this realistic that, like, hey, if you get a chunk of like 20 grand thrown on your lap, like, you're gonna take it.
Yeah. On July 27th, The World and Journal offered to sell the Newsboys papers to them at 55 cents per hundred, but the union rejected. 2 days later, the papers offered a compromise. They would buy back unsold copies of their newspapers, but leave the price as is. This would mean that the boys who had trouble selling all of their papers would not be forced to eat the cost, which was like a really big issue for them. Or like be forced to sell late into the night to avoid taking that loss.
And that's something that I haven't considered, is selling newspapers. It's only good for one day. Very few people are buying the newspaper a day later. So if you,
it's
or
useless.
nobody,
Yeah.
It's useless. So you eat the cost of whatever you don't sell. It is literally pointless. It goes in the trash.
Yeah. So whether it was due to a diminished sense of faith in the union's leaders after the whole like Kid Blink and others like him being possibly paid off, or just being overeager to get back to work and start making money. Because again, as you mentioned, like they need to make money. These kids, they're living off pennies a day. The Newsboys Union did accept the offer without an official vote, might I add. And the strike officially ended on August 1st in New York. Many newsboys were upset at the outcome, saying they could have gotten more, but thought the leaders were once again, quote, bought off by the papers.
Bought off, or just simply needed money?
Yeah.
needed to work.
Regardless of the somewhat murky and, in my opinion, anticlimactic end to the strike, it truly did have some significant consequences and ripple effects for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Hearst, feeling betrayed by his fellow publishers by the entire ordeal, withdrew from the Newspaper Publishers Association. The Newsboys Union continued to grow more organized and had a ripple effect in other child labor industries of the time. It was credited for inspiring later strikes, including the Butte, Montana Newsboy Strike of 1914 and a 1920s strike in Louisville, Kentucky, as well as multiple walkouts by bootblacks and messengers across the country. So other like very prominently child labor unions or groups. This strike proved that children, even poor and immigrant newsboys, could organize and put real pressure, challenging the idea that they and other child laborers like them were too young or weak to have a voice.
Yeah.
It was also a powerful example of the possibility of success during the growing labor movement of the time that we talked about.
For sure.
The strike also drew national attention to the harsh exploitation of poverty faced by child laborers.
They're leading them to drink.
Yes.
These children are smoking. They're stressed.
Smoking cigars in the street. Sparking public sympathy and laying the initial groundwork for future child labor laws and protections that a few decades later would actually go into effect.
These small acts of resistance. Now I'm quoting from a musical from Suffs, which says, like, we might not see change during our lifetime, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it to fight.
Yeah. Now, I just want to close with you describing one more picture that maybe we'll post to our Instagram, hopefully for our viewers as well.
God, I cannot.
I know, they're children. They're like, some of these kids look like they're 6 years old.
Yeah. Okay. So she's showing me a picture of these newsies, but really, looking at this picture, maybe the oldest kid is 12, and there's only two, maybe 12-year-olds. I'm looking at primarily 6 to 8-year-olds. I really feel like it's shocking. This is shocking.
But yeah, and again, I think the newspaper, the photographer for the newspaper was being strategic. They were getting all the picture of the youngest, most,
for sure,
to try to sell those papers or whatever. But I mean, these are all newsies. They were all affected by this. So it's just, very striking imagery for the group that made a huge impact and change in the newspaper industry.
They really did. And actually, what I super appreciate about this story is showing the impact they had, but also just being really human and really realistic, that we all do have to make money. So sometimes there is compromise.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there won't be eventual change.
Yeah. No, I like that. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks.
I'm just trying to stay afloat over here, just trying to give us all a little hope.
And a little empathy, a little.
Yeah. And empathy too, that we look at the government shutdown that happened last year. And while so many of us were behind the cause and the reason for it, there are also people that needed work.
Mm-hmm.
We there were a lot of federal employees that were out of work. And so you have to have some empathy for the other side too, that
just wanted
to end because, hey, we all need a paycheck.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Hashtag History. All sources used to put together this episode can be found on our website at hashtaghistory-pod.com. And Leah had a bunch of shocking pictures that I will be sure to put on our Instagram. Be sure to check that out at #history_podcast.
Subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you use. Share about us with your family and friends. Give us a rate and review.
And come join us over on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can help support our books and booze supply. This is really a place where you can just support the podcast, and in exchange for your support, you will receive an automatic 15% off all merchandise, and we will mail you cards and stickers.
Finally, I'd like to give a very special shout out and thank you to Rachel's husband, Alex, who now and hopefully for forever edits the podcast in my stead. Thank you, Alex.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And thank you all for listening to this episode.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye.